My name is Margaret Collins. I turned 80 this winter. The older I get, the more I realize how quietly a life can pass, not in storms, not in tragedies, but in ordinary Tuesdays that stack up like folded laundry until you look back and wonder where the decades went. I married Michael in 1967. I was 24 years old. He was 26, handsome in that clean-cut way men were back then. Dark hair, steady handshake, the kind of smile that made you feel chosen. Everyone said I was lucky, and maybe in the beginning I was. We rented a small apartment with thin walls and avocado green appliances. We ate spaghetti at a card table and talked about the future like it was something we could design. He used to ask about my day. He used to reach for my hand in the grocery store. I remember thinking, this is what it means to be seen. But somewhere between the first anniversary and the third, something shifted. Not a fight, not a betrayal, just a thinning. The first time I truly noticed it was 1970. I had just come home from the store. I was excited about something I can't even remember what now. Maybe I ran into an old friend. Maybe I found strawberries on sale. It doesn't matter. What matters is this. I started telling him about it while he sat in his chair reading the evening paper. I kept talking. He didn't look up. I thought maybe he hadn't heard me, so I continued. Still nothing. Halfway through my sentence, I stopped speaking. He didn't notice. I stood there in the kitchen holding grocery bags, my words hanging unfinished in the air, and he never realized the story had ended. It was such a small moment, almost nothing, but I felt something close inside me. I told myself it was stress, work, fatigue, marriage settling into routine. People always said romance fades. Real life replaces it. I accepted that explanation because the alternative was harder. The alternative was admitting that I felt invisible. So I waited. I waited for things to return to how they were at the beginning. I waited for him to look up again. We had 2 children, David and Emily. I thought fatherhood might soften him, give him depth, anchor him more firmly to us. He provided. That much is true. He never missed a day of work. The mortgage was paid. The car ran. The roof didn't leak. But he lived like life was happening around him, not with him. He came home, sat in his chair, opened his paper. Later the television, sports mostly. The children and I learned to orbit around that chair. I remember one evening, David, he must have been 7, ran into the living room holding a drawing, a family portrait in crayon. Our house, a bright yellow sun, stick figures holding hands. Dad, look what I made. Michael glanced up for less than a second. That's nice, buddy. Then back to the paper. I watched David's shoulders drop. I told him how beautiful it was, and it was, but I saw it in his face. He hadn't been drawing for me. That was when I realized invisibility can be inherited. Still, I waited. When the kids grow up, I told myself, when it's just the 2 of us again, we'll find each other. Waiting became the background music of my life. In 1995, the kids left home. The house went quiet in a way that felt both peaceful and frightening. I remember standing in the hallway outside their bedrooms, doors open, beds neatly made. It felt like a chapter closing. I thought, this is it. Now we'll reconnect. I planned a weekend away, a small bed and breakfast in the mountains. Nothing extravagant, just fresh air and quiet. I packed carefully, even bought a new sweater. The drive up was polite but empty. Small talk, weather, Gas prices. When we checked in, I stood by the window, admiring the view. Tall pines, a narrow trail winding into the trees. It looked like the kind of place where people talk. Michael turned on the television. He watched sports most of that weekend. I suggested a walk. Maybe later, he said. Later never came. On the drive home, I watched the road blur past and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Resignation. Still, I told myself retirement would change things. He retired in 2005, 64 years old. I imagined mornings with coffee together, afternoon walks, conversations we had postponed for decades. Instead, he replaced work with golf, television, half-finished projects in the garage. He was always tired when I wanted to talk, but never too tired for a tea time. There's a peculiar loneliness in being married to someone who isn't cruel, isn't violent, isn't unfaithful, just absent. You can't point to a single event and say, that's when it broke. It breaks quietly. Over dinner eaten in front of the TV, over birthdays forgotten, over stories that go unheard. I considered leaving many times in my 40s, in my 50s, even in my 60s. But every time I came close, I asked myself the same question. What if he changes? What if I leave and then he realizes what he lost? What if I just need to wait a little longer? So I waited. 45 years of waiting. Michael died 2 years ago, a heart attack. Quick, no warning. At the funeral, people told me how lucky I was. At least he didn't suffer. You had so many years together. I stood there nodding, feeling like I was attending a service for a man I didn't fully know. Friends told stories about how funny he was at work, how generous he was on the golf course, how kind he could be. I remember thinking, who was that man? The man I knew forgot my birthday more times than he remembered it. The man I knew never once asked me if I was happy. Standing at his grave, I expected devastation. Instead, I felt something else, relief. Not because he was gone, but because I was no longer waiting. That realization frightened me at first. It felt disloyal, but it was honest. The cost of waiting is not loud. It doesn't show up on bank statements or medical charts. It shows up in the slow erosion of your own voice, in the hobbies you never pursue because he isn't interested, in the friendships you shrink to fit his comfort, in the dreams you quietly fold away. Time kept moving. Seasons changed outside our kitchen window. Children grew. Hair turned gray. And I was still waiting. I am 80 now. The house is quiet, but it feels different than it did before. It feels like mine. I wake up early. The light comes in soft through the curtains. I make coffee the way I like it, a little stronger than Michael ever preferred. I sit at the kitchen table and listen to the refrigerator hum. Sometimes I open the window just to hear the birds. Small freedoms, but they matter. I joined the local library book club last year. I was nervous walking in that first afternoon, like a schoolgirl on the first day of class. But no one ignored me. When I spoke, people looked at me. They listened. I take walks in the evening now, slowly. I notice things I used to rush past, the way sunlight catches in the maple leaves, the smell of someone grilling dinner down the block. For so many years, my life felt paused, like I was standing in a doorway waiting for someone else to step through first. Now I step forward. What remains at this age is clarity, People do not change because we hope they will. They change because something inside them shifts, and sometimes it doesn't. That is not a judgment. It is simply truth. I don't spend my days angry anymore. Anger is heavy. I carried it quietly for decades without even naming it. Now I prefer lighter things. I think about the young woman I was in 1967, 24, full of hope, certain that love meant endurance. If I could sit beside her now, maybe on this very porch, I wouldn't scold her for staying. I understand why she did. She believed in commitment. She believed in patience. I would only tell her this: your life is not a waiting room. What remains of my marriage are not dramatic fights or scandals. It's quieter than that. It's the image of him in his chair, the rustle of newspaper pages, the glow of the television on his face in a dark room. And then there are other images too. David's crayon drawing, Emily laughing in the kitchen, me standing with grocery bags in my hands, realizing mid-sentence that no one was listening. Those moments shaped me more than I knew. I don't regret my children. I don't regret the house or the shared history, but I do mourn the years I spent believing that tomorrow would fix what today would not. At 80, I no longer measure life in decades. I measure it in mornings, in phone calls with my daughter, in afternoons spent reading by the window. I might have 5 years left, maybe 10 if I'm fortunate. They are mine now, not because I am alone, but because I am awake. There is a peace that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to grant you permission to live. It doesn't arrive all at once. It settles slowly, like dusk over a neighborhood. You look up and realize the light has changed. I sit on this porch most evenings. The air cools. The street grows quiet. I think about how long I believed that endurance was love. Maybe sometimes it is, but love should not make you disappear. What remains, when the waiting ends, is yourself, your voice, your time, your small, ordinary joys. And if there is one thing I understand now, at 80 years old, it is this: a life can be lost not only by leaving too soon, but by staying long after you have vanished.